Is marriage hell? If you watch any sort of sitcom, or if, like me, you hid in the closet when your parents screamed obscenities at each other, you might believe, and you might also be in therapy. Or at least I hope you are, because there's only room for one severely traumatized person on this channel, and that's me. Hi, I'm an autism advocate and crisis counselor for survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence. I do quick little deep dives in between my long-form deep dives about things like the many controversies of Autism Speak, Chris Chan, and how Gamergate memed Donald Trump into office. So if you'd like to see those, give me a follow. If you grew up as a millennial or are the reanimated corpse of someone who is Gen X, you're probably familiar with the TV sitcom couple. Ricky and Lucy from I Love Lucy, Homer and Marge from The Simpsons, or Peg and Al Bundy from Married with Children, not to be confused with Ted Bundy. Most dynamics in the multicam sitcoms follow a similar setup. A blue-collar husband who works all the time, a wife who takes care of the kids and gets into shenanigans in the home, and the kids who are either one really smart one who's overworked and an idiot.
Chris, the way to eat an Oreo is to twist it, pull it apart, and lick it. Now you.
The wife may or may not have a job, but if she does, she's a passionate career woman who is still somehow the primary parent of the kids and is in charge of cooking, cleaning, and all the domestic labor.
Your mom works very hard, just now she works for us.
Oh, and one other consistency, the husband and wife sharking hate each other. Like, yeah, didn't you notice? All these characters seem to do is complain about being married, or they do nothing but fight and snip at each other. Here's the thing. Comedy comes from friction, and if there's no friction, there's no comedy, defeating the purpose of comedic shows. But why do they have to all be so abusive? Before we go in, first, trigger warnings for discussion of domestic violence, which will be censored for pleasing the YouTube gods. Second, let's define some things. Despite what has been historically taught about domestic violence and abuse, it is more than just physical violence. DV has many faces, including stuff like psychological or emotional abuse, degradation, attacking someone's vulnerabilities, ignoring feelings, failing to respect privacy, and gaslighting. These aren't all of the core aspects of psychological or emotional abuse, but these are the ones most relevant to the topic at hand because, oh boy, do these bumbling but lovable husbands just love to abuse their wives. The trope of hating marriage and your partner arguably began with Honeymooners, starring Jackie Gleason as Ralph, your typical everyman New York City bus driver, and his long-suffering wife, Alice, played by Audrey Meadow.
You seem to have forgotten that I am a woman.
I forgot that you're a woman. How could I? You're always yapping.
One of the running gags within the show is that Ralph always comes up with a get-rich-quick scheme, which usually fails comedically, and Alice points it out whenever they do, leading Ralph to, well, as Futurama put it,
one of these days, Alice, bang, zoom, straight to the moon.
He was just using space travel as a metaphor for beating his wife.
Television. And though many defenders of the show argue that since Alice never backed down from it, it totally means Ralph would never actually hit her. No. Let me remind you that threats of domestic violence are still, in and of themselves, domestic violence. Like, you do know that, right? I need to know that you know that. The Honeymooners' legacy as one of the earliest TV sitcoms solidified the bumbling husband and nagging wife trope, which influenced other sitcoms from The Flintstones to Married with Children, Everybody Loves Raymond, King of Queens, Kevin Can Wait, and my new and most recent favorite of the trope's usage, Kevin Can F Himself. Kevin Can F Himself is an AMC original show, which you can now binge on Netflix in just 2 days like I did, starring Annie Murphy as Allison McRoberts, the nagging wife, and Eric Peterson as her bumbling husband, the titular Kevin who can go shark himself.
Is that blood? It doesn't mean you get to be moody. You already used that excuse once this month.
The show is unique in the way that it uses the sitcom trope to make commentary on the sitcom wife and how she might be feeling when the cameras aren't rolling. Whenever Allison and Kevin are together, the world is shot as a multicam sitcom with bright colors, quippy dialogue, and a very obvious set, one that looks almost identical to the one in All in the Family or also Everyone Loves Raymond. But then, whenever Kevin leaves the room, the tone changes, bringing it to a realistic setting with muted tones, more realistic dialogue, and a darker theme. Despite the two tonal opposite styles of TV shows being shoved together, they actually blend together seamlessly in a way that has had me in a psychological chokehold for the last 2 weeks. So we are making a thing about it, and we are monetizing it. because I have to get something out of this hyperfixation. What I want to talk about in this particular mini deep dive is the framing. While yes, the show is a satire of multicam sitcoms, in order to use satire correctly, it must be commenting on the thing it is satirizing. It's not enough for satire to just be a copy of something else. That's called parody, or in worst cases, plagiarism. And it's also not enough to qualify as satire to just say slurs, as many people in online spaces claim. Satire must have a point of view on the thing that it is commenting on. That's why parody movies like the Scary Movie franchise have lost their luster. The first two Scary movies had a point about the horror genre. They commented on the poor choices made by the final girl, or the poor motives behind the film's villains.
You've seen one too many TV shows!
No! Watching television shows doesn't create psycho killers. Canceling TV shows does!
But then, as the films went on, they didn't run out of films to parody, they ran out of opinions on the films they satirized. Ironically enough, another example of this phenomenon is the Scream franchise in and of itself, which Scary Movie originally was satirizing. Scream originally started out as a satire for the horror genre.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
And it also stars my arch nemesis, the amazing human being that is Matthew Lillard. Shark you, Matthew. You know what you did.
I always come back.
I'm just kidding. Matthew Lillard is actually amazing, but he's still my arch nemesis. But as the franchise went on, they ran out of opinions on the tropes that they were satirizing.
Real stab movies are meta-slasher whodunits, full stop.
Kevin Can F himself has an opinion on the tropes that they're satirizing, and it's not great. The opinion, I mean. Not the satire. The satire is perfect. The usage of satire aims to highlight not just how audience members tend to misunderstand the nagging wife in sitcoms, but if you look at the times in which the show chooses to use the multicam format versus when it becomes single camera drama, it highlights that they're not just making commentary on the nagging wife trope. They're talking about how sitcoms treat their female characters as a whole. As I mentioned, whenever Kevin enters a room, the whole world becomes a sitcom. One starring Kevin, where his wacky schemes have no consequence on him whatsoever, and everyone loves him because he's Kevin.
Put another win on the board. In the game of life, it's Kevin 632, life 3. New Belichick hoodie day, baby. Yeah!
Many viewers have discussed how this is just the way Allison sees her world when Kevin is around, and how she has to think of it in order to get through her life. This is a beautiful interpretation, but I don't believe this is just about Allison's delusion. Despite the show starting with Allison as the single main character, it quickly evolves into Patty, her next door neighbor, and the typical tomboy trope, becoming a main character with almost equal footing to Allison.
Let's die alone together. Let's die alone together.
Though at first it seems as if the sitcom moments are only Allison's delusion, in the season 1 episode Broken, we see the sitcom framing used in a scene between Patty, her girlfriend Tammy, and her brother Neil, who happens to be Kevin's best friend and the wacky neighbor trope.
And I tie him down to a chair, and I shine a light in his eyes, real dramatic like.
Well, that's illegal.
Neither Kevin nor Allison appear in this scene, yet the audience witnesses the same sitcom style. So if the sitcom style is not Allison's delusion, how can we figure out what the sitcom framing is supposed to mean? To answer that, we have to look at the times in which the show chooses to break the multicam style and go into complex drama. The first time we see the sitcom style break without Allison just leaving Kevin's vicinity is at the end of the first episode, Livin' the Dream, where in a scene which Kevin has put together breakfast to make up for once again ruining their anniversary with not only a party that she specifically didn't want, but also a revelation that he had completely drained all of their savings.
Nobody thinks that we're leaving, but I promise you.
The account's empty.
What?
A few years ago, he got into some hot water trading fake sports memorabilia.
Thus trapping them in a house that she hates. In most sitcoms, this breakfast would be enough to make up for everything in the eyes of the wife, because even though he makes her life extraordinarily difficult, he does love her, and that makes up for everything in the end. Instead, Allison breaks the wine bottle and the series cuts to hard drama, with this being the moment she begins to plot to murder her husband.
I'm a widow.
How'd that happen?
Oh, I killed him.
The second time we see the sitcom break mid-scene is in the season finale, where after Neil overhears Allison's plot to murder Kevin, the two get into a physical altercation, with Neil attempting to strangle her before Patty saves the day by breaking a wine bottle over her brother's head, with the breaking of a glass once again shifting us as the audience out of the world of the sitcom and back into reality. The filmmaker's choice to shatter glass in both scenes strikes me as significant, with the breaking of glass in film being symbolic of both a loss of control and a turning point within a story. The glass shatters the false world that is the sitcom and brings the audience into what is happening at that moment. But what exactly is happening at the moment? The answer is that each of these moments is when one of the women decides to decenter the man in her life and become the main character of her own story. Kevin is the sitcom's main character, the wacky husband whose schemes drive the plot. Everyone is always talking about Kevin, and everything always leads back to Kevin, and at the end of every episode, Kevin always comes out ahead. This is how Allison has run her life in the last 7 years since she married him. At the end of the first episode, after the knowledge that Kevin has completely drained their life savings shatters Allison's fantasies of a better life for herself.
We were gonna leave. Start over. He said that things were gonna change.
She decides to end the problem. Kevin being the problem that she's gonna end.
I have to beat him. I'm gonna kill Kevin.
When it comes to Patty, the centering of men in her life is much less noticeable. Very early on, she breaks up with her long-term boyfriend Kurt because she doesn't want to change her life for him.
I'm not normal because I want to live my life the way that I want to.
Look, if this is the way you want things, then yeah, I can't do it anymore.
Which doesn't exactly seem like someone who centers men in their life. Although even in that relationship in particular, Patty still spends several years eating food that she absolutely hates in order to make the man in her life happy. When we look at Patty's actions and dialogue throughout the show, it becomes incredibly apparent that most of Patty's life and choices revolve entirely around taking care of her older brother Neil.
I've never heard him before.
We see this through conversations between Patty and Allison early on in the show. Allison points out how Patty will do anything to remain one of the boys, including pretending to hate food she actually likes, such as oatmeal raisin cookies.
What friend is it for? Someone who doesn't pretend to hate things they like just to be one of the guys.
Because she knows that both Kevin and Neil hate oatmeal raisin cookies, so she obviously isn't allowed to like them.
Like a dessert with homework.
Yeah, it's like putting a vegetable on a cookie.
The only times we see the sitcom world without Kevin and Allison is when Neil interrupts Patty's date with her girlfriend Tammy to talk about the concerns between his friendship with Kevin, even placing himself directly in the center of the couch between Patty and Tammy. Even in the first bit of dialogue we hear between Patty and Neil, Neil comments,
What do you care? You're my sister. You used to change my diapers.
Which is weird, because you're 3 years older than me.
Though it's played off for laughs, this isn't the last time the show alludes to Patty constantly being Neil's caregiver. And in season 2, we discover that Patty pays for Neil's entire half of the rent.
He's not a complete idiot. He just wants you to think he is. Why? Because then you pay his rent and bail him out for 30 years.
She has to, right? Because you can't hold down a job for more than a couple of weeks.
It's not my fault. I get overwhelmed.
As just like Kevin, he's a man-child who doesn't have to grow up. She even starts selling drugs because he broke his leg after she specifically told him not to.
Oh, I'd say break a leg, but Neil most definitely will. My brother broke his leg.
Like, literally, how have men in sitcoms lived as long as they have, with all the stupid decisions that they make? Each time the women shatter a glass and rip the audience out of the sitcom fantasy and back into reality, they reach a turning point. One that says that these men are no longer going to be the center of their lives at any cost. One of my favorite aspects about this part of the show is that it goes to great lengths to show how once the glass is shattered, Neil is also brought out of the false reality that is the sitcom and slowly is forced to see the reality of the ways his actions affect the women in his life.
Fine, what do you want?
I want to sit out there and smoke and not worry about what anybody else needs.
That's the one thing I haven't been doing for you, Jesus.
after his head is shaved to get stitches for his head wound, he never grows his hair back. The scar on his head also never fully heals, showing that even if Neil wanted to, he could no longer live his life without seeing the hurt he can cause to others, because he has a permanent reminder on his body of how it can harm people. It even helps open his eyes about how his relationship with Kevin harms him.
You've been a jerk to me for forever, I think. Name one time. The time you ditched me and I got arrested!
In the first interaction between him and Kevin after the head wound, we see Neil try to go back to the false reality. Still, the color tone of the sitcom is noticeably less bright than before, and though Neil tries to have the same quippy dialogue,
You have the general vibe of a sad dog in a cone.
That's true. A lot went down.
Like, you know how they say that sore thumbs stick out? You actually look like that. Like a big, red, angry sore thumb.
he's clearly struggling with the realization that Kevin doesn't care about him.
I had to get stitches.
I was gonna guess that you got gum stuck in there and you passed out in a gutter. Oh, God! I was close!
But I'm fine.
Neil's arc throughout the second season highly reflects many men's experience when discovering that toxic masculinity harms them, for which Kevin, in and of himself, is a perfect metaphor.
Because I will fucking destroy you.
The bumbling but lovable husband and the man-child older brother tropes have both been in sitcoms for decades, but I think they've done a disservice to comedy and society as a whole. Maybe people will tell me, it's not that deep, bro. But isn't it? Isn't it really that deep? I don't know if you've ever been on dating apps, but I am a multi-year survivor of Tinder. And every time I think about men who would write that they're just looking for the Pam to their Jim or the Rachel to their Ross, I have a visceral reaction.
Stop it. Get some help.
Not only do these relationships only exist in the minds of television writers, but they are also profoundly dysfunctional and mostly rely on female characters to deal with the man's wacky antics. At the same time, she gets portrayed by both the show and the fan base as the nagging wife whose husband deserves better. Looking at you, Jim.
I just want to say that when Pam went to art school for only 3 months, when she was not yet married and didn't have children, people came down real hard on her because of Jim's feelings. When Jim invested in a business without telling Pam and left his family and left Pam alone to care for their 2 children while he chased his dreams, people came down on Pam again for not being supportive enough of Jim. So in both of these instances, I just want to say I noticed a lot of hate for Pam. Do I want to call it sexist? I do.
Some of these shows hate the wives so much that they go so far as to punish the nagging wife by completely killing her off for being too annoying. Like in the show Kevin Can Wait, a show which I think inspired the creator of Kevin Can F Himself the most, as apparent by the similarities in character, setting, and title.
It's from your mom's, Jim. It's a postcard. Haven't seen you. We miss you. You know what? So do I.
Okay, you know what? Give me that. I will call them right now. It's been over a year since she died. They shouldn't still be sending this.
That's right? Thank you. Oh, but don't throw that out. On the bottom, there's a coupon for a kung fu lesson. I want to go there.
After delving down this hyperfixation rabbit hole of mine for a week, it gave me a new appreciation for other sitcoms and how TV has mostly abandoned the trope of the nagging wife and the bumbling husband. Shows like How I Met Your Mother, though granted, they have their own set of problematic moments and characters that would ring like a horror story if they existed in real life.
Really? A genie comes out of it?
Only if you rub it hard enough.
Barney, you should be in jail.
Right to jail.
In How I Met Your Mother, the characters of Marshall and Lily, the show's only consistent married couple, seem like they would easily slide right into the bumbling husband and nagging wife trope. After all, Marshall has many wacky schemes that backfire, and Lily is often seen as the voice of reason, which usually comes across as nagging in sitcoms. Marshall is an equal part of their marriage, equal part of parenting their children, and makes sure to help with the household chores in whatever way he can. He tackles every major issue he and Lily have as a team instead of leaving her to be the one to handle it. And every single joke he makes about her is never at her expense. It's the opposite, with most of the jokes he makes being about how much he loves her and how attractive he finds her.
And I'm not wearing my wedding underwear.
What? No property of Marshall across the back? How are people going to know whose butt that is?
But more than loving that showrunners are letting go of the nagging wife trope, I love that the nagging wife is now getting her revenge. Because sometimes it's fun supporting women's rights. But other times, it's more fun supporting women's wrongs. Hey there! Today's Patreon shoutout is Sarah Nolte. Sarah, thank you so much for being a part of the Patreon. I seriously could not make the content that I make without people like you. You guys are the reason I get up in the morning and can function. Because if not, I would just be yapping on the internet for free. Or shouting in the streets like the deranged monster that I am. But to the rest of our viewers who are still here, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, subscribe, let me know what content you want to see from me. And if you'd like to be our next Patreon shoutout, please check out our Patreon subscription or our YouTube memberships down below. Until then, I will see you in the following video. Bye!